even a Lion King fan?
Really? It's a very common thing when you see a standoff. They put it in with standoff scenes because that's where it originated from. Law of sines. Law of sines is when you solve a triangle when you don't have a right triangle. Law of sines is for non-right triangles. And when you label these things through with a non-right triangle, what I want to do is just draw a triangle. Label them A, B, C. Capital letters are generally used, well, standard used for your vertices, for your angles, whereas the opposite side then would be lowercase. So opposite angle A would be little a, little b, and little c. Yes, I know C's look the same. You just have to roll them. Okay. Yeah, that's what I do. So what happens here with what's called the law of sines, and I know you guys saw this last year, is that it's a proportionality of the sides. Okay. What happens is if you take the sine of one angle to its side opposite, it equals the sine of the next angle to its side opposite to the sine of the next angle to its side opposite. So you wind up with this. The sine of angle A is to little a, as the sine of angle B is to little b, as the sine of angle C is to little c. In order to use law of sines, you want to always have one side and its angle opposite. Okay? If you don't have that, then we'll have to use the law of cosines, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. Okay? So when you're dealing with law of sines, it's just really a lot of the same generic setups over and over again. But what does have the possibility of occurring is that you could use, let's try this first. Solve triangle ABC with angle C, angle B, and side B, which means you want to draw said picture. Do you have to make sure you draw a 103 degree angle, a 28 degree angle to make this work? No, just draw a triangle and label it. Now, when I look at this, I have 3 parts to the triangle, which means that there are how many parts yet to find? 3 of them. So what I always like to do is write down what I have to find. I have to find angle A, I gotta find little a, and I gotta find little c. That way I know that I make sure I get all 3 of them. It's a nice trick to remind yourselves to do. That way you make sure, it's kind of like you're creating your own little checklist of things to do. Okay? Now the easiest thing to find here is angle A, because how many degrees are in a triangle? 180. So if you take 180, subtract out the 103, you're going to get what, 77? Sure. Subtract the 28, you're going to get 49? 49. So I know that angle A is 49 degrees. So now, going into my triangle, I know that I have angle B and its side opposite. This is the part that I'm going to utilize to solve for side A and for side B, side C for both of them. Always reuse what you know. So I write it out. Sine of 28 is to 26 as the sine of 103 is to little c. The other one would be sine of 28 is to, what was it, 26? As the sine of 49 is to little a. So now you have cross multiplying and solving. Now, one of the things I want you guys to remember, when you're doing this, try to write it out. Okay? Try to write it out, that way you see where things are going. I know if I go across and move this up, I'm going to get C sine 28 is 26 sine 103. And then I just got to divide it by the sine of 28. That's going to give me my value of C. Now, when I do this in the calculator, what's nice about yours, you can do the alpha y equals and make your fraction bar. I highly recommend that. You run less of a risk by using a fraction bar than you guys will by using parentheses and dividing. You're going to be a lot less likely to screw up. Okay? So if I create my fraction bar, then I type in 26 sine 103 over sine 28, I get some number. I get 5396.
Yes.
Do you guys agree?
Yep.
Are you in degree mode? I forgot to tell you. Did you get yours in degree? Do you want to change that? Get the mode button? I forgot that.
Oh, I know.
Okay, ask about that. Yeah, you won't get that answer if you're in radiant mode. It won't be so rad.
Why do they?
Okay. Everybody get that for C? Okay. So this is good. I fill this in. I have 53. And then I got to do the same thing for A. Multiply across. So now I have 26 sine 49 over sine 28. 41.8. And I round to 2 decimal places because 796 goes down. Is that okay? Yes, ma'am.
Can you do it like the fraction? You have to like close the parentheses.
If you're using the fraction bar, you don't. As long as you can use the fraction bar, it's okay. That's why I use the fraction bar, because sometimes people forget about that parenthesis. You guys will always remember to hit the down arrow and you'll be all right. And also, and this kind of came what Lisa was saying, if you put that 26 in front, you're also going to be okay. And that way you don't have to worry about closing up those parentheses. So now, take a look at what you have. Do you know how to tell if it makes sense via your angles and sides? Remember that? Remember those rules? Yes, sir.
The largest angle should have the longest side across.
Correct. The largest angle should always have the largest side length across, whereas the medium, small, small. Usually, if it follows that pattern, you're probably okay. All right? And there's one really big reason that we always remind ourselves about the largest angle, especially when we switch the law of cosines. Because if you find the largest angle first, you're going to alleviate the possibility 9 times out of 10 of having what we call an ambiguous case of law of sines. There's a lot of craziness that can happen in trading. Right? Not so bad? Vaguely remember this?
Yeah.
Now, here's what happens when things can get weird. So if I look at this one, I'm given only one angle to start with. Which means I'm going to have to figure out one of the other angles right away. Which other angle am I going to be able to find? A. I can find angle A because I have side opposite A. Okay? So I start with that. So if I start with sine of, so I know I have to find angle A, I got to find angle B, and I got to find side B. Okay. Let's go for angle A first. I'm going to use C as my pivot because I have both of them. Sine of 122 is 218. is the sine of A is 212. Let's show you a little shortcut here. Is there any reason for me to multiply both sides by the 18 to have to divide it back over to the other side? Since I have to just solve, I'm solving for the angle A here, what I'm going to do is just multiply by 12. I'm going to get 12 sine 122 over 18 is the sine of A. So we need to make sure we know how to put this in the calculator correctly. So, 12 sine 122 over 18 equals some crummy number. That crummy number equals the sine of A. Do you guys remember the keystrokes you have to press to find A? Nope. What was it? Second sine, very good. Remember, in order to find the A value here, what we're doing is we're going to get some crummy number. So what we do is take the inverse sine of some number equal A. Because to undo a sine, you inverse it. So that's where our trig functions come in. So now what I do in my calculator, since I've got this decimal stored right now, I'm going to hit second sine of my answer. Okay. And I'm getting 34.43. Now, the trick starts to come into play with law of sines when you have to find an angle first. Whenever you're given just one angle, and this kind of goes into what we're going to start talking about, you always want to see if the two angles that you now have, well, I'll show you in a second there. Let's show you the weird one first. Okay, we'll get there. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. How do you figure out B? Subtract from 180. And what do you get? And now, we use that C again. Not C, I'm sorry, I think I found B. Okay. So I'm going to get 18 sine 2357 divided by the sine of 122 is B. And I just made a mistake here, and I'll show you what I did. I'm getting 8.49. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Do you guys know the reason why I always write out what I'm doing before I put it in the calculator?
So you don't mess up.
So you don't mess up. When I first typed it in, I realized I wrote it down, and I accidentally typed in 25.37 instead of 23.57. I flip-flopped those two numbers. Now, if I did that, I got 9.09. Now, if 9.09, it's still across from the smallest angle, so I would have thought in the back of my head, well, it looks like it could be right. But it's not the correct answer. But the reason that I had this here, and if I wrote 909, I usually take a minute or two to figure out what you did wrong. And it happened on your test the other day when we had some of the rounding stuff. I found out that a couple of you guys used the wrong dates, wrong years, okay? Little things like that. I was able to figure it out. and I was able to backtrack whether or not you kind of knew what you were doing, depending upon how much information you actually gave me. If you didn't give me enough information, I couldn't figure out what you were doing. Because a lot of it, as you know, when you use cut, they're supposed to make that face. Look. Let's hold off on ambiguous for tomorrow. The weird ambiguous and no triangle stuff. Okay? We'll hold off on that for tomorrow because I want to make sure we get just regular stuff first. Let me figure out what problems then. Since we won't have time to make the ambiguous, let's do, so it's 13.5, it's page 803. Let's just do numbers 24 through 28. I'll give you 5 of them. Okay? Straight law science, it is just one triangle style problems. Solve them all out, draw a picture, fill in the blanks. Trust me, if you guys list out the parts that you're looking for, you'll remember what you're looking for. Okay? It's very, very easy to overlook something. Okay?